And the city has a way of making people invisible, especially the old. You walk past them on the sidewalk, eyes glued to your phone, and they're just obstacles in your path. And gray hair, walkers, slow steps. You don't see the history in their eyes. You don't see the wars they lived through, the children they raised, or the empires they built from scratch. You just see something that's taking too long to cross the street. It was a Tuesday afternoon, unseasonably cold for October, and the wind was cutting through the downtown corridor, whipping trash against the pristine glass storefronts. Me, Tiny, and Breaker were walking down Fifth Avenue, and we weren't there to shop. We were killing time while Tank fixed a busted fuel line on my bike a few blocks over. We were just three guys in leather vests, taking up space and watching the suits scurry back to their offices. That's when we passed the Grid. You know the place, and one of those high-end electronics stores that looks more like a spaceship than a shop, floor-to-ceiling glass. Bright white lights that hurt your eyes, and salespeople who look like models and security guards who look like they police academy entrance exam 3 times in a row. And standing outside the revolving doors was a woman. Let's call her Martha. She had to be 95 years old, maybe older. She was tiny and barely 5 feet tall, even if she stood up straight. But she was hunched over a silver walker that had tennis balls on the back legs. And she was wearing a faded floral dress that looked like it belonged in a 1950s photograph. And over it, she wore an oversized, thick denim jacket. It was old denim, and the kind that has been washed 1,000 times until it's soft as silk but tough as iron. She was shivering a little. Her hands, and thin as parchment paper and spotted with age, were shaking as she held an old flip phone. She was trying to get through the revolving door, but the timing was off, and every time she pushed her walker forward, the automatic door would spin too fast, and she'd flinch and pull back. She was trapped on the sidewalk, confused, cold, and just trying to get inside to ask a question. Inside the glass, I saw him. The guard, let's call him Brad. Brad was tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a uniform that was 2 sizes too tight in the biceps, purely for vanity. He was standing with his arms crossed and staring at Martha through the glass like she was a stain on his perfect floor. He wasn't moving to help. He wasn't slowing the door down. He was just watching, annoyed. And finally, Martha gathered her courage. She pushed the walker into the door. She shuffled forward. The door clipped the back of her heel, but she made it inside, and she looked relieved. She looked around the bright, sterile store, blinking behind her thick glasses. She spotted Brad. To her, a man in a uniform meant help, and it meant safety. She shuffled over to him. The squeak of her walker on the polished marble floor echoed in the quiet store. "Excuse me, officer," she said, and her voice was thin, like dry leaves scraping together. "My phone. It stopped ringing. I'm waiting for a call from my grandson. It's his birthday." And Brad didn't uncross his arms. He looked down his nose at her. "We don't fix flip phones, lady," Brad said. His voice was loud, unnecessarily loud. "And this is for smart devices. Buy a new one or move along." Martha looked confused. She didn't understand the tone. She just held out the phone with a trembling hand. And it worked yesterday," she whispered. "I just need to know if it's broken." Said move. Brad snapped. He took a step toward her. "You're blocking the entrance, and you're scaring off the real customers. Look at you. You look homeless." That hit me hard. I was standing outside the glass about 10 feet away. I stopped walking, and Tiny bumped into me. "Jax, what's the hold up?" Tiny asked. I pointed through the glass. "Watch." Martha straightened up as much as her spine would allow, and there was a flash of dignity in her cloudy eyes. "I am not homeless," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "I bought this jacket in 1968, and I have lived in this city longer than you have been alive. I just need help, and I need you gone." Brad growled. He reached out, and he didn't grab her arm gently to guide her out. He didn't point to the door. He put his hand on her shoulder and shoved. It wasn't a punch. It wasn't a tackle. But when you are 95 years old and your bones are like glass, a shove is a deadly weapon. Martha gasped. Her feet tangled with the legs of her walker, and she tipped backward. It happened in slow motion. Her eyes went wide with pure terror. The walker clattered to the side. Her hands flailed, trying to grab the air. CRCK, and she hit the floor. Hard. Her hip hit the marble with a sickening thud. Her glasses flew off her face and slid across the floor, and stopping at the feet of a customer who was buying a laptop. The entire store went silent. The music seemed to cut out. The chatter stopped. Martha lay there, and curled in a ball, clutching her shoulder. She made a sound, a low, pained whimper, that tore right through the glass and into my chest. Brad stood over her, and adjusting his belt. He looked around the store, his face red, trying to justify what he'd just done. She tripped. Brad announced to the stunned shoppers. And
I tried to catch her.
she's drunk or something. He was lying, and he was standing over a fallen elder like a predator. He didn't know who she was, and he didn't look at the denim jacket she was wearing. He didn't see the back of it, but I did. When she fell, the jacket had bunched up, and the back panel was facing the glass now. It was faded. The embroidery was frayed, but the gold thread still caught the light. Top rocker Motor Mafia, center patch high, and a gold heart with pistons. Bottom rocker faux du my DR. My blood turned to ice, and then instantly boiled into steam. Tiny saw it too. He gasped. And Jax? Tiny whispered, his voice trembling with rage. Is that? Yeah, it's Ma. That's the first cut. Brad looked down at the old woman moaning in pain. And, get up. He hissed at her. Get up before I call the cops. He reached down to grab her collar, to drag her out like a bag of trash. He made 2 mistakes that day, and the first was pushing her. The second was thinking the glass door between us would save him. I didn't open the door. I kicked it, and the automatic door jumped off its track with a deafening crash. I walked in. The sound of my boots on the marble was heavier than the silence. Brad looked up, and he saw me. He saw Tiny. He saw Breaker. He saw 3 men who looked like nightmares, walking toward him with eyes that promised absolutely no mercy. And, you got a problem? Brad stammered, trying to look tough, stepping away from Martha. Problem? I asked. My voice was calm, and the kind of calm before a tornado touches down. No, I don't have a problem. I looked at Martha on the floor. I knelt down beside her. I ignored Brad completely. Don't move, I whispered. Don't move. She opened her eyes. She squinted without her glasses. Jax, she whispered. Is that my Jax? It's me, Ma, I said, and I looked up at Brad. You touched her, I said. She was loitering, Brad yelled, his voice cracking. I'm security. I have rights. I stood up slowly, and I kept rising until I towered over him. You didn't read the jacket, did you, kid? What? Brad blinked. It's just some old rag. And turn her over. I told Breaker gently. Show him. Breaker carefully adjusted the jacket on Martha's back so the patch was facing Brad. Read it, I commanded, and Brad looked. He squinted. Motor Mafia. He looked at the patch on my chest, then the patch on her back, and the color drained from his face so fast he looked like a ghost. She is in the club, Brad whispered. She isn't in the club, I said, and stepping into his personal space until I could smell his cheap cologne and his fear. She made the club. The air in the store changed the second I said those words, and it went from the sterile, humming silence of a high-end shop to the heavy, suffocating pressure of a storm front. Brad blinked, and he looked at the patch on Martha's back again, his brain trying to process the information. He saw the faded denim, and he saw the stitching that was uneven because it was done by hand, her hands 50 years ago. He looked at the massive biker standing in front of him, and then at the 95-year-old woman on the floor, and the math just wasn't adding up for him. You're crazy, Brad stammered, and, taking a step back but keeping his hand near his belt, like he was reaching for a weapon he didn't have. She's just some old lady. She can't be, and she can't be with you guys. She isn't with us, I repeated, my voice dropping an octave, rumbling like an idling engine. She is us. I turned to the crowd, and a circle had formed. Shoppers with expensive bags and startled expressions were holding up their phones recording. Good, let them record. In 1969, I said, and loud enough for the back of the store to hear. When the Motor Mafia was just 5 guys in a garage with no heat, this woman brought them soup. And, when the police tried to shut them down for noise, she stood on the porch with a broom and told the sergeant to go home. She stitched the first cut, the very first patch, and with a needle and thread she bought with money she made scrubbing floors. I looked back at Brad. He was sweating now, a cold and greasy sweat that made his forehead shine under the harsh fluorescent lights. She didn't buy that jacket at a mall, kid, I said. She earned it. Every single thread, and Tiny was on his knees next to Martha. For a man who can bench press a motorcycle, he was moving with the tenderness of a nurse. He gently touched her shoulder, and, Tiny whispered. You okay? Did you break anything? Martha looked up at him. Her face was pale, and her lip was bleeding a little where she had bitten it when she fell. But her eyes were clear. Tinny, she rasped. Is that you? You got big. Yeah, and, Ma, Tiny choked out, his voice thick with emotion. I ate my vegetables like you said. Help me up, she whispered. My hit, it hurts. And Tiny slipped his massive arms under her. He lifted her like she weighed nothing, because she barely did. She was frail, light as a bird. He set her on her feet, but her legs buckled. Whoa, Tiny said, catching her. Easy, lean on me. She leaned into his leather vest, and the smell of oil and road dust must have felt like home to her. because she closed her eyes and let out a long, shaky breath. My glasses, she murmured, and I can't see without them. Breaker was already moving. He walked over to where the glasses had slid. He picked them up. One of the lenses was cracked, and a spiderweb fracture right down the middle. Breaker looked at the glasses. Then he looked at Brad. Breaker doesn't talk much. He lets his actions do the talking, and he walked up to Brad, holding the broken glasses out in his palm. You broke them, Breaker said. It was an accident, Brad yelled, and his voice echoing off the glass walls. She fell! I told you she was loitering! I have a job to do! I keep the entrance clear! And you pushed a 95-year-old woman, I said, stepping between Breaker the guard before Breaker decided to dismantle him. You put your hands on a civilian, and that's assault. I'm security! Brad shouted. I have authority. Uniform, I corrected him. That doesn't give you the right to hurt people, and it gives you the responsibility to protect them. Suddenly, the sound of clapping heels clicked rapidly across the floor. What is going on here? And a man in a sharp blue suit came running out from the back office. He had a name tag that said Ass Minigar. He looked at the scene, 3 large bikers, and a terrified security guard, and an old woman leaning on a giant. He immediately made the wrong assumption. You 3! The manager pointed at us. Get out, and I'm calling the police. You can't just barge in here and harass my staff. He didn't look at Martha. He didn't see the blood on her lip. He only saw the leather vests, and he saw the gang. Harass. I laughed. It was a dark, dry sound. Your staff just threw a founding member of our community onto the floor because she walked too slow, and the manager blinked. He looked at Brad. Is that true? Brad panicked. She was blocking the door. She looked homeless, sir. I thought she was begging, and I tried to escort her out and she tripped. Liar, a voice said from the crowd. A young woman stepped forward. She was holding her phone up. I recorded it, she said, and her voice shaking but angry. He didn't escort her. He shoved her. Hard. The manager's face went pale. He looked at the phone, then at Brad, and let me see that. The manager demanded, reaching for the girl's phone. No, the girl said, pulling it back. I'm posting it, right now. Failed or abuse. And the manager wiped sweat from his upper lip. He knew what that meant. PR nightmare. Corporate would have his head. He turned to us, putting on a fake and customer service smile. Look, gentlemen, he said, holding up his hands. I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding. We can resolve this. Why don't you leave, and we'll give the lady a gift card. $20. For the trouble? I stared at him. $20. I repeated. 50. The manager offered, sweating harder. Look, and just get her out of here. She's bleeding. It's unsanitary. That was the breaking point. Tiny growled. It was a low and animalistic sound that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Unsanitary. Tiny roared. He took a step toward the manager, and the manager squeaked and hid behind Brad. Brad, feeling cornered and stupid, decided to play the hero. He reached for his belt again. He pulled out a baton and a telescoping metal stick. A snap. He flicked it open. Back off, waving the metal rod. I'm armed. Get out of my store or I'll crack your skulls. And the entire store gasped. You don't pull a weapon on the Motor Mafia unless you intend to use it. And if you use it, you better not miss. I looked at the baton, and then I looked at Brad's shaking hand. You really want to do this? I asked softly. You pushed an old lady. Now you want to swing a stick at us, and you're digging a grave with a teaspoon, kid. I said back off. Brad swung the baton wildly. It whooshed through the air, inches from my face. Jax, Martha whispered, and she was trembling against Tiny. Don't, please, I just want to go home. My phone. I missed the call, and hearing her worry about a phone call while a lunatic waved a weapon was heartbreaking. We're going home, Ma, I said, keeping my eyes on Brad. But first, and we're going to teach this place a lesson about respect. I'm calling the cops, the manager shrieked, fumbling for his phone. Go ahead, I said. Call them, and call the SWAT team. Call the National Guard. But until they get here, you're locked in here with us. I walked over to the broken automatic door, and the one I had kicked off its track. I grabbed the sliding panels. With a grunt of effort, I shoved them manually until they jammed shut, and I turned around and leaned against the glass. Doors are closed, I announced to the room. Nobody leaves until Martha gets an apology. A real one. And Brad looked at the blocked exit. He looked at the baton in his hand. He looked at the 50 people recording him. You can't do this, Brad yelled. This is kidnapping. And it's a sit-in, I said, crossing my arms. Civil disobedience. We're protesting stupidity. Brad lunged. He lost his nerve. The pressure broke him, and he screamed and swung the baton directly at my head. I didn't move. I didn't flinch, because before the metal could hit me, and a hand shot out and caught the baton in mid-air. It wasn't Tiny. It wasn't Breaker, it was a customer, a tall and gray-haired man in a business suit who had been watching silently from the corner. He caught the baton with one hand, twisting Brad's wrist until he dropped it, and Brad yelped and fell back. The man in the suit stepped forward. He looked at me, then at Martha. "She's the founding mother?" The man asked. "Yeah," I said, surprised, and the man unbuttoned his expensive suit jacket. Underneath, pinned to his white dress shirt, was a small silver pin, a piston and a heart. "And I rode with Chapter 4 back in '82, the man said, "before I went corporate." He looked at Brad, who was cradling his wrist. "You messed up, son," the man said, "and you don't touch the family." Then he turned to me. "Jax, isn't it?" "Yeah. I just texted the local chapter," the man said, checking his watch, "and they were 2 blocks away at a rally." "They're coming." Brad's eyes went wide. "Who's coming?" The man smiled. "Everyone." And that's when we heard it. Not 1 bike, and not 10. The sound started as a low hum, vibrating the glass windows. Then it became a roar, and a thunder that shook the expensive smartwatches on the display tables. 50 twin engines. The cavalry wasn't just coming. The cavalry had arrived, and the glass walls of the grid were supposed to be shatterproof. They were designed to withstand hurricanes and smash and grab robberies, but they weren't designed to withstand the sonic vibration of 50 motorcycles idling at once. The shelves rattled. A display of smart home speakers toppled over and clattering to the floor like plastic dominoes. The manager clapped his hands over his ears. Brad, the security guard who felt so big 5 minutes ago and looked like he wanted to crawl inside a ventilation duct. Outside, it was a sea of chrome and black leather. The local chapter had arrived. They didn't park in spots, and they rode right up onto the sidewalk, blocking the entire storefront. They formed a wall, a physical barrier between the store and the rest of the city. Engines cut, and the sudden silence was heavier than the noise. 50 men and women dismounted. They didn't yell. They didn't throw rocks. They just stood there, arms crossed, and staring through the glass. They saw Martha on the floor. They saw Tiny holding her. They saw the manager shaking. And they waited. Open the door. The manager squeaked, and he was sweating so much his expensive suit was turning dark at the armpits. "Let them in." "No, keep them out. Call the police." "I already called them," I said, and leaning against a display case of Vutter's 1,000 phones. "But I think my friends got here first." Brad looked at the baton on the floor, and the one the man in the suit had twisted out of his hand. He looked at me. "Are they going to kill us?" Brad whispered. "No," I said. "We don't kill people, Brad, and that's messy. We just make sure everyone knows exactly who you are." I looked at the girl who had recorded the assault. She was still filming and live streaming the whole thing. "How many people are watching?" I asked her. 3,000, she said, her eyes wide. "And climbing." Brad groaned. And his career wasn't just over, it was being cremated in real time. Then sirens. Blue and red lights flashed against the glass, mixing with the reflection of the bikers. And the police had arrived. 2 cruisers pulled up. 4 officers got out. They looked at the wall of bikers. They looked at the store. They didn't draw their weapons. And they knew the Motor Mafia. We have an understanding in this city. We don't start trouble, but we finish it. The lead officer was Sergeant Miller, a good cop, and he's been on the beat for 20 years. He knows the difference between a gang and a club. Miller pushed through the front entrance, and, stepping over the broken track I had kicked in. "Jax," Miller sighed, looking at me. "Why is it every time I get a call about a disturbance, you're in the middle of it?" "And I didn't start this, Sarge," I said. "I'm just the customer service rep." Miller looked around. He saw the manager hyperventilating. He saw Brad cowering. And he saw the man in the suit standing calmly by the counter. And then he saw Martha. Miller's face changed. He took off his hat. "Mrs. O'Connell?" Miller asked, and his voice softening. Martha looked up from Tiny's lap. She squinted. "Is that little Timmy Miller?" she asked. "It is, ma'am," Miller said. He walked over and knelt down. "And my dad used to ride with your husband back in the 70s. Are you okay?" "I'm old Timmy," she smiled weakly. "And the floor is hard. But these boys are taking care of me." And Miller stood up. The softness vanished. He turned to the room, his hand resting on his belt. "Who put her on the floor?" Miller asked. The room went dead silent, and the manager pointed a shaking finger at us. "They did! They brutalized the door! That man," he pointed at me, "threatened my staff!" And Lear, the girl with the phone, shouted again. "I have the video." Miller looked at the girl. "Show me." She walked over and held up her screen. Miller watched, and I watched his eyes. He saw the shove fall. He saw Brad standing over her, arrogant and cruel. Miller watched it twice. Then he turned to Brad. "And you?" Miller said. Brad swallowed. "Officer, she was loitering. She looked like a vagrant. I have the right to remove." And you have the right to remain silent, Miller interrupted. He pulled out his handcuffs. Turn around. What? Brad shrieked. For doing my job. And for assault on an elderly person? Miller said, spinning Brad around and clicking the cuffs onto his wrists. And for being stupid enough to do it on camera. And the manager realized the ship was sinking. He tried to bail. I didn't tell him to push her, the manager yelled. I just told him to keep the entrance clear. And this is rogue behavior. I want to press charges too. Save it for the judge, Miller said. You're responsible for your security. You can explain it downtown. And Miller looked at me. Jax, you and your boys need to clear the sidewalk. You're blocking traffic. We're not leaving until she walks out, I said. And, or is carried out with respect. Ambulance is 2 minutes out, Miller said. Let them do their job. We'll see, I said. Just then, Martha tried to stand up again. And no ambulance, she whispered. I don't like hospitals. They smell like bleach and death. You took a hard hit, Tiny said gently. You need a scan. And, I need my phone fixed, Martha said, stubborn as a mule. My grandson is calling. He's 10 today. She looked at the manager. You? She said. It wasn't a question, and it was a summons. The manager froze. Ming. Yes, you. Martha said, my phone. It doesn't ring. Fix it. The manager looked at the police, and he looked at the bikers outside. He looked at the founding mother of the Motor Mafia staring him down with eyes that had seen more life than he could imagine. And we don't service flip phones. The manager stammered, repeating Brad's line. We don't have the parts. The man in the suit, the corporate guy who had caught the baton, and stepped forward. Actually, the suit said, pulling a sleek, silver smartphone out of his pocket. I think we can make an exception, or rather, an upgrade. And he handed the phone to Martha. This is the latest model, the suit said, voice-activated large screen. It's already activated. The manager's jaw dropped. Sir, and that's a $1,200 prototype. You can't just, I'm the regional director, the suit said coldly to the manager. I own this store. And you're fired. And the manager gasped, fired? But policy. Policy number 1, the suit said is don't assault the customers. Get your things. Leave. The manager slumped, defeated, and he walked to the back office, head hanging low. The suit knelt down next to Martha. I'll program your grandson's number, he said gently. What's his name? And Leo, she said. His name is Leo. The suit tapped the screen. He handed her, say call Leo, he instructed. Martha held the shiny glass rectangle, and she looked skeptical. Call Leo, she whispered, ringing. On the speakerphone, a young voice picked up instantly. Grandma, is that you? I've been waiting by the phone. And Martha's face lit up. It was like the sun coming out from behind a cloud. The pain in her hip seemed to vanish. Happy birthday, my angel, she said, and her voice trembling with joy. I'm sorry I'm late. I had a little trouble with the technology. Are you okay, Grandma? The boy asked. I'm fine, sweetie, she lied. And she looked at me. She looked at Tiny. She looked at the 50 bikers standing guard outside the glass. I ran into some old friends. They're helping me. And the boy said, I love you, Grandma. I love you too. She hung up. She looked at the suit. Thank you, she said. How much do I owe you? And it's on the house, the suit said. Consider it a late fee for the inconvenience. Brad was being led out by Officer Miller. He walked past us, head down, and looking at the floor. Wet, Martha said. Miller stopped. Brad stopped. Martha reached into her pocket again. Her hand was shaking, but she pulled out another butterscotch candy. The yellow wrapper crinkled in the silence. Give this to him, Martha said to Miller. Why? Brad asked, looking up, and confused. After what I did. Because hate tastes bitter, son, Martha said. And you look like you've been eating it your whole life. Try something sweet, and it might change your perspective. Brad stared at the candy. He started to cry. Real ugly tears. The weight of his shame finally crashing down on him, and Miller took the candy. I'll make sure he gets it, ma'am. They walked out. Now it was just us. The suit, the bikers, and the founding mother. Can you walk, Ma? I asked. And, if you boys help me, she said. Tiny on one side, me on the other. Breaker grabbing the walker. We lifted her up. We walked toward the door. And the bikers outside saw us moving. They parted like the Red Sea, creating a path to her old sedan parked down the block. We walked out of the store. The cold wind hit us, but it didn't feel cold anymore. It felt like victory. But the story wasn't over. As we helped Martha into her car, she grabbed my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. And, Jax, she said, there's one more thing. Anything, Ma. That boy, she said, pointing at the empty doorway where Brad had stood. He wasn't just mean, he was scared. And someone told him to be that way. What do you mean? The store? She said. I heard him talking on his radio before I came in, and he said, the clean-up crew is coming tonight. He wasn't talking about janitors. I frowned. Clean-up crew. I've been around the block, Jax, she whispered. And I know when a place is a front. That manager wasn't just selling phones. He was moving something out the back door. And I looked back at the grid. The regional director was inside, looking at inventory on a computer, frowning. If Martha was right, and she was always right, and then Brad and the manager were just pawns. And by getting the manager fired and the police involved, we might have just kicked a hornet's nest. Get her home, and Tiny, I ordered, stay with her. Where are you going? Tiny asked. I'm gonna have a chat with our new friend in the suit, I said. If this place is dirty, and I want to know why they were so desperate to keep an old lady away from the door. I walked back toward the store. The bikers revved their engines, and a warning growl to the city. The assault was over, but the mystery, it was just beginning. The automatic doors of the grid were jammed shut, but the service entrance in the back was wide open. I walked back into the store. The air inside felt different now. The sterile and air-conditioned chill had been replaced by a heavy, humid tension. The customers had been ushered out by the police. The staff, mostly scared teenagers in polo shirts, and were huddled in the break room. The regional director, the man in the expensive suit who had saved the day, was standing behind the main counter. Let's call him Silas. And Silas wasn't looking at sales figures. He was tearing the computer apart. He had the monitor turned sideways, scrolling through lines of code and inventory logs, and his tie was loosened. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing a faded tattoo on his forearm, a winged wheel. Old school. You looking for the bathroom? And Jax? Silas asked without looking up. I'm looking for the dirt, I said, leaning on the counter. Martha said this place smelled funny, and it wasn't the floor cleaner. And Silas stopped typing. He looked at me over his rimless glasses. She said the guard mentioned a clean-up crew. I continued. And she didn't think he meant mops and buckets. Silas sighed. He spun the monitor around so I could see. I thought it was just incompetence, Silas said, and pointing at the screen. Inventory shrink. Missing units. I came down here today to fire the manager for being lazy. But this. He tapped a line of red text. And what am I looking at? Phantom inventory, Silas said. According to this, we received 500 units of the new X90 phone last week, but we only sold 50. And the stockroom. It shows 0. So where are they? They never existed, Silas said darkly. Or they went out the back door as soon as they came in. This store. And it's a laundromat, Jax. Someone is washing money through high-end tech. The manager, I said. And Brad. Small fish. Silas shook his head. And they don't have the brains to rig the corporate server. They were just the gatekeepers, keeping people out. Keeping prying eyes, like old ladies with questions, and, away from the operation, clang. A loud noise came from the back of the store, the loading dock. Silas froze. He looked at his watch. It's 6:00 p.m., Silas whispered. And store closing time. The cleanup crew, I said. Silas reached under the counter. I thought he was going for a stapler. He pulled out a .45 caliber pistol. And I haven't ridden in 30 years. Silas smiled grimly, checking the chamber. But I didn't forget how to dance. Put that away, I said. You're corporate now. And let the union hand her piece. Breaker. Tank. Bring the boys around back quietly. On it. Breaker's voice crackled in my ear, and we walked toward the back room. The employees only doors swung open. The stockroom was massive. Rows of high shelves packed with boxes. But in the center of the room, and near the loading bay, the floor was clear. A black van had backed right up to the bay doors. The engine was running. 3 men were tossing boxes into the back of the van, and they weren't wearing store uniforms. They were wearing gray coveralls, no names. They moved with military precision, fast, silent. The fired manager, and the guy who had tried to buy Martha off with $50, was standing there, holding a clipboard, looking terrified. Hurry up, the manager hissed, and the regional director is here. He fired me. If he checks the inventory. Shut up, one of the men in coveralls said. He didn't stop loading. We take the shipment, and we wipe the servers. You disappear. Disappear? The manager squeaked. That wasn't the deal! I want my cut! The man in coveralls stopped. He turned around, and he had a scar running down his cheek. He reached into his belt. He wasn't reaching for a wallet. Hey! I shouted. The sound echoed off the metal walls. Every head turned, and I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Silas stood beside me, looking every bit the angry boss. You boys forget to scan your items? I asked. The scarred man looked at us, and he didn't panic. He didn't run, he just smiled. A cold, dead smile. Stores closed, Scar said. Private party. And I think you have something that belongs to the company, Silas said, stepping forward. Those boxes. And the dignity of this establishment. Scar laughed, and he pulled a gun. A suppressed pistol. We're taking the boxes, Scar said. And we're taking you too. No witnesses? And the manager screamed and dove behind a pallet of air conditioners. You really think two old men can stop us? Scar asked, raising the weapon. Two, I asked, and, you need to get your eyes checked. I whistled. Rumble. The sound came from everywhere at once. It vibrated the corrugated metal roof. It shook the concrete floor, and the loading bay doors were wide open to the alley. And in the alley, headlights turned on 1, 10, 20, 50 high beams flooded the dark loading dock, and blinding the men in the van. The roar of 50 motorcycles revving in a confined alleyway is deafening. It sounds like the end of the world. Scar shielded his eyes. And, what the hell? The customer service department. I yelled over the noise. Breaker walked out of the shadows of the alley, holding a tire iron. Tank was beside him, and holding a wrench the size of a baseball bat. Behind them, the entire chapter filled the space, a wall of leather and anger. Scar looked at his two men, and they looked at the 50 bikers. Drive! Scar yelled, jumping into the van. The driver slammed on the gas. The tires screeched. But there was nowhere to go, and Tank had parked his massive trike directly behind the van. Crush. The van slammed into the heavy motorcycle. The trike didn't move, and the van's bumper crumpled like tin foil. Scar kicked the van door open. He aimed his gun at Breaker. Don't, I shouted. It wasn't a warning for Breaker, and it was a warning for Scar, because you don't pull a gun on Breaker unless you want to eat it. Breaker threw the tire iron. It wasn't an aimless throw. It was a sniper shot, and clang. The iron hit Scar's hand. The gun went flying, skittering across the concrete. Scar howled in pain, clutching his broken fingers. And the other two men in coveralls looked at the bikers. They looked at their boss screaming on the ground. They looked at the manager shivering behind the air conditioners, and they raised their hands. Smart choice, Silas said. The bikers moved in. It was efficient. They dragged the men out of the van, and they tied them with the same efficiency they used to fix engines. I walked over to the van. I looked inside the boxes they were stealing. It wasn't phones, and it was chips. High-grade, military-spec microchips. Stolen tech. Silas, I called out. I don't think your store sells these. Silas looked in the box, and his face went pale. These are guidance chips, Silas whispered. Strictly controlled. Illegal to export. This isn't just theft, Jax. This is treason. And the manager peeked out from his hiding spot. I didn't know, the manager sobbed. They just told me it was surplus parts, and they paid me $5,000 a week to look the other way. You looked the other way when an old lady needed help, too, I said, walking over to him. Bad habit. And I grabbed the manager by his tie. You're gonna tell the police everything, every name, every date, every shipment. I can't, the manager cried. They'll kill me. The syndicate, they don't leave loose ends. The syndicate, I asked. The name hung in the air, heavy, dangerous. It was the same name Vargo had used, and the same shadow we had fought weeks ago. They're everywhere, the manager whispered. This store, the post office, the docks. You can't stop them? Maybe not, I said, and looking at Scar, who was glaring at me from the ground. But we can certainly ruin their day. Sirens wailed in the distance. Sergeant Miller was coming back, and Silas looked at me. You should go, Jax, Silas said. I can handle the police. I'll hand them the evidence. I'll explain the citizen's arrest. You sure? I asked, and, yeah. Silas smiled, buttoning his jacket. I'm the regional director. They tend to believe the guy in the suit. He looked at the bikers holding the criminals. And, besides, Silas added, we have a birthday party to get to. I smiled. Ride safe, brother, I said. Keep the rubber side down, Silas replied, and we walked out to the alley. The cold air felt good. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a deep, satisfying fatigue. We mounted up. The engines roared to life, and a symphony of victory. As we rode away, I looked back at the store. The lights were flashing. The bad guys were in cuffs. The corporate suit had found his spine. But my mind was on Martha. She had faced down a bully with a butterscotch candy. She had tipped us off to a major crime ring just by listening. She wasn't just a victim, and she was a warrior. We rode through the city, heading toward the small house on Elm Street. We had a cake to buy, and a 10-year-old boy to meet. And, because when you mess with the founding mother, you don't just get a beating. You get the whole family. The sun had set by the time we reached the outskirts of the city, and the streetlights were humming to life, casting long orange shadows on the pavement. We weren't riding in an attack formation anymore. We were riding in a parade formation, and 2 by 2. 50 bikes, chrome gleaming under the street lamps. The deep, rhythmic rumble of the engines wasn't angry tonight. It was a lullaby of horsepower. And we pulled onto a quiet street lined with oak trees. It was the kind of neighborhood where people walked their dogs at night and left their porch lights on. And at the end of the cul-de-sac, there was a small house with a "Happy 10th Birthday, Leo" banner draped across the garage door. And Martha's old sedan was already parked in the driveway. Tiny had driven her straight there while we dealt with the smugglers. We cut the engines, and silence fell over the neighborhood, heavy and sudden. Curtains in the windows of the other houses twitched. People were peeking out and wondering why an army had just parked on their lawn. I walked up the driveway. I was holding a small, white box from a bakery we stopped at on the way, and the front door opened before I could knock. A boy stood there. He was wearing a paper crown that sat crooked on his head. He had Martha's eyes, bright, intelligent, and currently wide with shock. Are you the guys? Leo whispered. I nut down. I was covered in road dust, grease, and the lingering smell of the loading dock fight. But I smiled. We're the guys, I said. Your grandma invited us. Is the party still on? And Leo looked past me at the 50 bikers standing on his lawn. They looked terrifying to most people. Big beards, tattoos, scars. But to a 10-year-old boy, and we looked like real-life superheroes. Yeah, Leo shouted, turning back into the house. Grandma, they're here! The whole army is here! We filed inside, and it was a tight squeeze. 50 bikers in a living room meant for 10 people is a logistical nightmare. But we made it work. Tank sat on the floor, and Breaker leaned against the wall. Tiny took up the entire love seat. Martha was sitting in the big armchair by the fireplace. She looked tired, and her hip was probably screaming in pain, and her lip was still swollen. But she was beaming. She looked like a queen holding court. And, you made it, she said softly as I handed her the bakery box. We wouldn't miss it, Ma, I said. Besides, we had to make a delivery. I opened the box. It wasn't a cake, and it was a cupcake. A single, perfect cupcake with a sparkler on top. Happy birthday, Leo, I said. Leo grabbed the cupcake. But he wasn't looking at the frosting, and he was looking at the leather vest I was holding in my other hand. It was a youth-sized cut. Black leather. Brand new. On the back, and it didn't say, Motor Mafia. You have to earn that. It said Prototar. This is for you, I said, handing it to him, because you take care of your grandma, and any man who protects the founding mother is a brother to us. Leo put on the vest. It was too big, swallowing his small frame. He looked at Martha. Look, Grandma, and I'm in the club. Martha laughed. It was a warm, raspy sound. You've always been in the club, honey, she said. You have my blood. The party was chaotic and beautiful, and Tank taught Leo how to arm wrestle. Breaker showed him how to tie a bandana properly. Tiny sat by Martha's feet and listening to stories about the old days when she used to chase cops off a porch with a garden hose. For a few hours, we weren't vigilantes, and we weren't fighting syndicates or corrupt managers. We were just a family. But as the night wound down, Martha called me over. She had moved to the kitchen to make tea, and she was standing by the window, looking out at the bikes parked in the moonlight. Jax, she said, her voice serious. Yeah, Ma. That man, she said. And the one in the suit, Salas. What about him? He used to ride with us, she said, decades ago. Before he went corporate, he was a good kid, but he left because he was scared. Scared of what? Scared of what we were becoming? Martha said. He saw the darkness coming before any of us did. If he's back, and if he's helping you, it means the darkness is back too. I thought about the smuggling ring, the chips, the syndicate, that Vargo and the manager were so terrified of. We'll handle it, Ma, I said. The bad guys are in cuffs. For now, Martha whispered. She turned to look at me. Her eyes were sharp, piercing. But weeds grow back, Jax, and, especially when you cut them, you have to pull them out by the root. She reached into her pocket. She pulled out the new smartphone Silas had given her, and, he put something on here, she said. Before he gave it to me, he said to show you. I took the phone. I opened the photo gallery. There was only one picture, and it wasn't a selfie. It was a photo of a document, a shipping manifest from Grit. It showed a list of locations, warehouses, docks, post offices, and at the bottom, and a signature, the Red Scorpion. My blood ran cold. Silas hadn't just given her a phone to be nice. He had given us the map, and he used the old lady as a courier because he knew no one would suspect her. He knew I would protect her. He knew, I whispered, and he knew you were the safest way to get this intel out. He's smart, but he's using us. Maybe, I said, or maybe he's asking for help the only way he knows how. I looked at Leo in the living room, asleep on the couch, wearing his leather vest, and I looked at my brothers laughing and cleaning up the wrapping paper. This fight wasn't over. The manager and Brad were just the beginning. The syndicate was real, and now, and thanks to Martha, we had their address book. We'll finish it, Ma, I promised. I won't let them touch this city. Martha patted my cheek. Her hand was rough, calloused, and warm. I know you will, she said. Just remember one thing. What's that? Don't forget to eat, she smiled. You look thin. I laughed, and it was the first real laugh I had all day. Yes, Mom. We left at midnight. The ride back to the clubhouse was quiet. The weight of the new intel sat heavy in my pocket, and right next to the butterscotch candy Martha had slipped me before we left. As we rode through the city, I looked at the storefronts, the dark alleys, and the places where the invisible people, the old, the weak, the forgotten lived. People like Brad see them as obstacles. They see them as trash to be swept away, but they're wrong. The old woman shuffling down the street with a walker. She might be the reason you have a street to walk on, and she might be holding the keys to the kingdom in her pocket. Gray hair isn't weakness, it's camouflage. It's a disguise worn by survivors. And so the next time you see someone like Martha struggling with a door, don't shove her, open it. Because if you don't, and you might just find 50 of her sons waiting for you on the other side. And trust me, you don't want to meet the family. Ride safe, respect your elders, and never judge a book by its cover. This is Jax signing off.